met Shane in 2011. He was at the site of Planned Parenthood where I had an abortion in 1988. It was September 1st. It was the anniversary of my abortion, and I felt God calling me to give my story in front of that building, even though they had already moved out to South Des Moines. I give my testimony before in Washington, D.C., and actually at the state capitol in Lincoln, Nebraska. I only invited a few reporters. One, Shane, showed up, and I guess it was just another part of my healing. I grew up in Iowa, mostly grew up in Pella. We moved to Carroll, Iowa, when I was in junior high, and then I went to high school in Lake City, Iowa. And after high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I kind of went to a couple different community colleges, DMAC in Ankeny, and I went to Iowa Central Community College in Fort Dodge. And that's where I met this guy who seemed like a great guy. My cousin introduced me to him. But it wasn't long before he became physically abusive. And so it was the end of the semester in May. So I broke off that relationship and moved home. And I had actually started on birth control pills. I went to the Planned Parenthood in Fort Dodge and got birth control pills. And I found out later I got pregnant a month later after starting those pills. But I was, home for the summer. I was busy. I didn't know. I didn't have a period, but I thought, I'm on birth control pills. I can't be pregnant. So I was just in denial. By that fall, I'd moved back to Des Moines. In fact, I was living in Johnston, just down the road, and going back to DMAC in Ankeny. And I could no longer deny that I was pregnant. So I went to a family doctor in Carroll, and he confirmed that I was pregnant. And I remember he opened his drawer, office desk drawer, and pulled out photographs of couples that wanted to adopt a newborn baby. And I decided that I wanted to place my baby for adoption, and told my family and friends that was my plan. Well, I hadn't had contact with the father. I knew he had transferred to Iowa State, so I tracked him down and told him I was pregnant. And he said, well, you never knew his father, so he didn't want me to place the baby for adoption. So he basically gave me a choice of either getting married or having an abortion. And I felt like I had no choice. There were other pressures. A friend of mine who had had 2 abortions at the time was pressuring me to have an abortion. And I was at my apartment one day, and I just got off the phone with my dad. It was kind of an angry conversation, and my friend was right there with the phone book, the yellow pages, back then when they had phone books. She said, here's the number to Planned Parenthood, where they do abortions. And I didn't even know that Planned Parenthood did abortions. I got my birth control pills, and I knew you go to Des Moines to get an abortion. I didn't know it was Planned Parenthood. So I called the number, and there was an operator, answered the phone. She asked how far along I was, and I said, I think about 3 months. I don't know. I didn't know gestational weeks back then. I was 19. And she said, well, you need to come in right away. And she told me to come in the next morning and bring $200 cash. So it was the beginning of the semester, and I didn't have cash, and I wasn't going to tell my dad that I needed cash for an abortion. So I returned my textbooks to get the $200 and went in. And in my mind, they didn't even say the word abortion. I didn't, in my mind, I thought they're getting rid of my problem. I didn't even know what the procedure was, how they even did it. I got there. The friend that was with me came with me because you need someone to drive you home after the procedure. And right away, you go to a window, and I paid the $200 cash. And then I sat in the waiting room. It seemed like I was there pretty much all day, but there was a waiting room full of women. And I just have to say that this is the same Planned Parenthood of the Heartland. They operate their clinics the exact same way today. You pay, and then you sit and you wait, and you're herded in. Well, it was my turn for my counseling, and I went into a room, and there was a woman, and all I remember her saying was, "You seem sad," and I started crying. And she gave me this little white pill and said, "Just take this, it'll make you feel better." And I was sent back out to the waiting room, and apparently it must have been a sedative. My friend said I was sleeping and snoring in the waiting room, so I don't remember any part of the waiting room. The next thing I remember was waking up on the table, and I didn't meet the doctor before. If I did, I don't remember. I just remember this figure walking in to my left, and the loud vacuum, and it just excruciating pain. And I was screaming, and I just remember a couple more employees just came in, and they got in my face. One woman, I just remember, got right in my face, and she's like, "Just breathe, just take deep breaths." And I didn't think it was ever going to end. And I could see out of the corner of my eye there's like a tube in a container, but I just didn't want to think what was in there. And afterwards, it was finally over. Everyone just scattered, left the room, except one woman. And I got up, and I was pretty much left sitting in a pool of blood. And there's a woman there. She had my belongings, she's just handing, just looking like this, like get out, take your stuff and go. And I didn't know if she was disgusted by me or the abortion. But and I was so sick. When I look back at my records, I was probably 15 or 16 weeks. And so they were probably, the maximum at the Planned Parenthood clinics is about 16 weeks, the ones they do at Planned Parenthood of the Heartland. And so I went to the recovery room, and there were 2 or 3 women lined up next to me recovering. They just had an abortion. And I was just really sick, and I remember one girl, this little blonde, looked like a sorority girl. She's like, "I'll never do this again." And there's a woman, like an employee. She wasn't even a nurse. She was just sitting like at a folding table across from us. And she's just like, "Well, hopefully you don't have to do this again," real snotty. She's almost like a school hall monitor. And, I was sick, and I got more sympathy from the girls who just aborted their babies. They're like, poor thing. Anyway, I just wanted to get out of there. And so the friend who took me there with my car, which was a stick shift, we got out to my car, and she says, well, I can't drive a stick shift. So I was doubled over in pain. I had to drive myself home. And that was just the beginning of denial. I just wanted to deny it happened. At first, I was actually relieved, even though it was horribly physically painful. I led myself to believe it was just a blob of tissue. I had to tell my dad something. I talked to him the next day on the phone, and I thought I was just telling him I miscarried, and I tried to tell him that, but I can't lie to my dad. And he said right away, are you sure? Did you have an abortion? I said, yeah, I had an abortion. He said, do you think you can live with yourself? I'm like, yep. But I knew I couldn't, but the only way I could was to deny that it was a baby. Well, God was working in my life, and actually about 6 months after the abortion, I met my husband, and God was always working. I knew God was with me, and he, a year after we got married in May of 1990, I committed my life to Christ, and God just showed me the humanity of the baby, as painful as that was. About 5 or 6 years after my abortion, I had a dream. It was a vivid dream where I was driving down the road, and a little girl was crossing the road there was a mom and dad. I don't know who they were, but I was about ready to hit this girl with a car, and she looked into my eyes before impact, and it was clearly, she looked like the father of the baby, my ex-boyfriend. She had white blonde hair, blue eyes, ocean blue eyes, and I knew that was my daughter. And at the time it was terrifying. I jolted up and sweating, but when I prayed about it and I read scripture, I was reading about the character of Rebecca in the Bible, and the footnotes said that something about God uses our mistakes for his good. And so I knew her name was Rebecca, and I would see her in heaven someday. And so over the years, God has called me to speak in Washington, D.C. for the overturn of Roe versus Wade. And in 2011, what spurred me to give my testimony in front of the Planned Parenthood in Lincoln, where we live, they decided, the Planned Parenthood clinic, abortion clinic, decided to move into my neighborhood. And just it's like a form of PTSD when you have an abortion. I couldn't even drive by the 19th and Cottage Grove building, let alone, now it's in my neighborhood. So I knew God was calling me to go there and pray for the women and the workers. And so for the last 4 years, I have been at the Lincoln Planned Parenthood praying, and have witnessed some amazing answers to those prayers. And I guess what I've learned from praying there, I still get this self-righteous anger when I see, the doctor and the security guards who just escort these women in. But God reminds me of where I was, 25 years ago, and He just keeps humbling me and reminding me of that, and praying for those people. And I just urge you to have mercy. If you can't, not everyone can go to a Planned Parenthood clinic to pray, but just a witness of prayer speaks to those women. There have been some women who they walk out just because they said, hey, I saw these people praying, and that the Holy Spirit speaks to them. And I just urge you to pray for these women and just speak and act with love around anyone you're talking to. You never know who is pregnant or in crisis or may be vulnerable to abortion. Just always speak with grace. And I'll take any questions.
We have time for probably just one or two quick questions. Anybody have a question that they'd like to ask Justine? Going once. Oh, hey, thank you.
Thanks for sharing, because I can tell in your voice that you found grace, but it's difficult yet. Give us some help in the whole situation with Planned Parenthood now and the very gruesome videos. And one of the things that is difficult about that is that we're trying to convince people who believe Planned Parenthood just helps prevent pregnancies. So there's the reality of that, of trying to convince people that that's not really what's happening. But at the same time, there's a lot of women such as yourself that if you see those videos or hear that information, it feels like they're talking about your child. And I don't know if that's true with you. I've heard that from other women.
Well,
so maybe give us a little bit of guidance, if you will, on how do we talk about this with women in a truthful manner, but also understanding that a lot of women have been in your situation.
Right. I think these videos, even for me, have brought out, it's the truth. I mean, this is what you see, a 16-week baby or 12, 13-week fully formed baby. It brings back those memories. And the people that are hurting, these pro-abortion activists, I mean, they're hurting. They've either had an abortion or been involved in abortion. I mean, you just you have to humble yourself if you're talking with them. I mean, if they don't know Christ, then they can't be healed or can't fathom the reality of a preborn baby with a soul. And but I mean, just your witness and love and getting them to know Christ. Yeah, there can't be healing without that.
I didn't see anybody raise their hand up, so I'm assuming only one question, which is fine. Thank you so much, Justine. Really appreciate it.